Well, the loss of a spouse is a highly emotional time. We understand that. The last thing you want to be thinking about is financial matters, legal matters, but we want to make sure that your estate plan reflects the new reality of your life and that, there are changes that probably need to be made, or at least discussions that need to be had. So we're going to walk you through the steps to take, maybe the updates, the essential updates that you need to have when you do lose a spouse. Welcome in. This is Complete Estate Planning. Ben George with Nick Rosenbauer at the Rosenbauer Law Office. And Nick, good to see you again. Before we get into today's a little bit, I guess, kind of an emotional topic, kind of a heavier topic today. How's everything going?
We're doing good. And yes, it's a sad one. I will admit, but I still think it's important to talk about. And again, a lot of these things, we'll be talking about kind of updates, reviews, things to check up on. And I want to be very clear that I'm not necessarily saying that everything has to be redone or changed, and you have to change your mind. When you lose your spouse, but it's more of this is a good idea to look at and to review as part of let's make sure everything else is buttoned up. It's a good thing to add to your list. So I want to be very clear about that. So speaking of that, I know I've mentioned this before, but we do need to circle back. Okay. We are 4 games into Green Dragons coaches pitch baseball, and it is as bad as advertised. We are in last place. We haven't won a game, and we're getting the snot kicked out of us in most games. And because, and I don't know if I said this before, but with the baseball season, they have practices for a few weeks, and then they have 2 games a week. So there's no practices again. I know what we need to work on, but I can't fix it.
Right.
It is just games at this point, which between you and me, soccer was a game and a practice a week. Same with basketball. So if I had my first game and said, wow, we need to work on rebounding or what have you, what do you know? We worked on it and we got better. But baseball,
we are who we are now, huh?
Whoa, yeah. Well, and then also I have learned, and I guess I didn't do a good job of coaching, but I did not anticipate certain things. Like I did not do a good job of teaching the kids kind of situational defense. Because in T-ball, it's always, if you accidentally field the ball, always throw it to first base. And they didn't even have outs, but here it's throw it to first. You get a guy on first. You don't want the second baseman or the shortstop throwing it to first. You want them to just go to second. And then if it's in the outfield, go to second. So I did not prepare situationally. So now in the games between every at bat, I tell all the guys, hey, now you go here. Now you go here, and it's kind of exhausting. But we are who we are at this point. It's pretty rough, and I'm sad to say that some of the stuff in the league is as I think obnoxiously over serious for 6, 7, and 8-year-olds as I was afraid of. So there's apparently the runner-ups last year bought rings for the 6, 7, and 8-year-olds for getting second place in the Monroe coaches pitch. By the way, my ERA is dropping by the week. I
am. Again, you're pitching to your own kids, right? So that's not good.
Yes, and well, so it's not good. I am, man. My kids can't seem to figure out my one pitch. So. But it's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, you'll be good. You'll look back and laugh, right?
Well, I'm laughing already, and we've still got a long way to go. But
well, we'll see what happens in a week or 2 from now. Maybe things have changed, and your ERA's crept back up to 9 or 10. Who knows? We'll see. But we always love the updates. Well, look, we got a great show. I know this again, it's a heavy topic, but look, we're talking about death every episode, right? So it's never easy, but these are conversations that need to be had. And I know a lot of people will find themselves in this situation, Nick, right? It's a pretty common one to lose a spouse. And when you do, I guess oftentimes you don't really think you need to do a whole lot with your estate because really a lot of your wishes probably stay the same, but there are things you have to update.
Well, right. And so, like I said before, it needs to be reviewed. Whether anything needs to be updated, and we'll get into the specifics here in a minute. That all depends on if circumstances or wishes have changed, but it definitely needs to be reviewed. And basically, what I feel like I have trouble kind of going over with clients is when one spouse passes away, they say, well, it's all the same, nothing's changed. And I say, well, unfortunately, because you're a widow, because you're a widower, everything's changed in your life. You're by yourself, and also, and again, we'll get into this as well, but some people, life has changed, circumstances has changed, and even if it hasn't, you may have different opinions or views on some of the people that you gave money to or some of the people that you gave a job to in light of losing a spouse. You may have people who say, wow, these people were really there for me. They were extremely helpful. They surprised me how much they stepped up, when my spouse was passing away.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. You'll say, wow, I thought they were going to be great, but they didn't help at all. They couldn't handle it, or the moment became too much and it was too emotional for them. So a lot of it is on top of circumstances. You can basically, again, this sounds crass, but I don't know a better way to put it, but you can see these people in action and you can see how they respond to, a situation where someone passes away. And now that you have seen how that works, you can say, okay, now that I've seen how they responded to their dad passing away, I know they're solid, or I know that they can't handle this and maybe I should put the responsibility on someone else. So yeah, we'll go through specifics here, but yes, the fact that someone's spouse has passed away means everything needs to be reviewed. And most likely some things have changed. Not always, but it at least needs to be looked at versus just left in the drawer and ignored.
Okay. Well, let's start with fiduciaries, and that's the first spot to check on, because I assume in a lot of cases, Nick, your spouse probably is in a role somewhere, right?
Yes, exactly. In the vast majority of cases, people who are married, they will choose each other to handle things. If something needs to be handled, they get sick, they pass away, and then they'll obviously have backups, or you should have backups. The number of plans I see where no backup is listed is terrifying. But that's another conversation for another day. And also, I think, so you need to look at that. And again, that's, executors, your financial power of attorney, your medical power of attorney, and then if you have a trust set up, the person who's going to be the backup trustee. So all of those jobs, whether it's taking care of you if you get sick or handling the money and the inheritance after you're gone, all of those have jobs. And I think people look at it differently when they're looking at, here's who I trust for the backups versus now they've been promoted. Okay, so the person who's backup automatically, steps up in line. And I think you need to look at those for the reasons we already talked about. If the person who is backup one and is now top of the list is not great with handling, financial matters or kind of handling things when you're incapacitated, you need to change it. Okay. And also for medical decisions, if that person was the person who couldn't go to the hospital and this was too much for them, you need to change it. And then another thing to keep in mind, and Ben, I think this is more of a concern when you don't have a backup or when you only have one backup, is how many people are left on the list. If you had 3 backups, then you still have a first, second, and third at this point, and I'm okay with that. I think you're properly insulated. But if maybe you only said like my wife is in charge and then one person's in charge, now you only have one person. You don't have backups anymore. Okay, so you need to be cognizant of, basically how risky this is. If it's down to one person, and if something happens to them, this whole thing falls apart, you at least need to replace backups. But if you've overbuilt this and you have 3 backups, I'm okay with that. So a lot of it comes down to, are these people still the right people for the job? Looking at it from the context of, you are now first. You are no longer just a backup and my wife or my husband can handle it. And then also the numbers game, like I said. So again, that applies to all the different jobs, making sure that you have enough people with enough contingencies to kind of insulate yourself from all of that. And again, like I said, you may look at, I've had a lot of these where they say, yep, no, this person still is good at first. This person's good backup. This person's good third backup. We still like the order on all of this. And nothing that's happened recently makes me second guess that. That's fine. That means you did a good job picking before, but then you see why we need to review it. You need to look over it, even if it doesn't need to be changed. And again, depends on the job, but I think you need to look at all of those with a fine-tooth comb.
So fiduciaries are first, then I guess the inheritance plan comes next, right? And maybe these aren't in particular order, Nick, so maybe I'm speaking out of line here, but inheritance is kind of the next thing you're looking at, right? And because this is probably going to shift in some capacity.
So it can, yes. Obviously, the fiduciaries, all your decision makers, that automatically shifts, especially if your spouse was in charge. They're not there anymore. So, backup becomes number 1, backup 2 becomes first backup, etc. The inheritance plan might not automatically shift. Most likely there'll be something that says when one of you passes away, the other one keeps everything or most of it. And then there should still be language that says when both of you pass away, here's who the money goes to. Especially, if that's not in your plan, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
But it still needs to be looked at because now it is, this sounds grim, but I only need one more person to pass away before the inheritance is going on. This is no longer necessarily something that's like way down the road. So look at, when you pass away, who you want to inherit, whether it's first in line, look at the backups. A lot of times we're looking at children or grandchildren, and a lot of this is situational. And it depends on how long ago the plan was done. So you need to look at it and say, do we still want to give the money to the people that we want to give it to? Are there any adjustments to be made? A lot of times, Ben, this is a part where during the process, the surviving spouse will say, I know we wanted it to go to the kids, but I like the grandkids more than the kids, honestly. So I want to give some money to them. And again, changing the inheritance plan is not necessarily something that automatically gets shifted when a first spouse passes away, unlike the decision makers, right? Because your decision maker's gone. But I still think you need to look at it to see if, goals have changed, priorities may have changed, the people may have changed. So again, it's something to look at while we're already popping the hood and reviewing everything. I think you should at least look at the inheritance plan. Although I will say, in my experience, I see a lower frequency that people will adjust the inheritance plan when a spouse passes away than the decision makers, because a lot of times that doesn't necessarily need to be changed. But again, you need to look at it while we're looking at everything.
Right. Then you got your final wishes, your medical decisions. And I know oftentimes a couple will make these decisions jointly, right? So I guess you kind of reevaluate what your final wishes are going to be and make those now independently.
Yes. So some of the burial funeral type decisions, kind of fall into place at this point, even if you did not make them while both spouses were alive. when your wife passes away, Ben, you have to figure out buried, cremated, like you are forced to make the decision at this point, right? You can't wait and let the kids do it later. So at this point, I'm guessing you want to be buried with your wife, probably, right? So a lot of times when you are making the final arrangements for your spouse, you're also making the final arrangements for yourself. I mean, obviously, like when my mom passed away, the place where her urn got laid to rest is also where dad's urn is going to go, right? So a
Right.
lot of this, ends up being, I want to match what was set up for my spouse. So a lot of that is fairly straightforward. You don't need to pick a cemetery anymore, right? So a lot of that is done. But as far as end of life decisions, artificial life support, end of life care, organ donation, that sort of thing, a lot of those. And again, I do this when reviewing medical directives anyway, but you review before you said you wanted to be an organ donor. Is that still what you want? And then here's your decisions you made for artificial life support. Is that still what you want? So it's a good time to review all of that. And then also, if you did not do it initially, now's a really good time to communicate your wishes to the family and let them know, hey, when something happens to me, this is no longer husband and wife. We're figuring this out with each other. It's now most likely one of the kids. So you need to bring that kid in the loop and say, hey, you have to take care of things for me. Here are my wishes on artificial life support or organ donation and things like that. So if you haven't communicated that before, you really need to do that now. So again, it's part of the reviewing process. And I hate to say do this while it's fresh, because you just had to bury your husband or your wife. But while you're going through all of this, now's probably the best time to look at it and then let the family know when it is my turn. Here's how I want to be taken care of, and here's what I want my kind of final arrangements to be.
We're talking about reviewing your estate plan after your spouse passes and what you need to be looking at and what conversations you should have with your estate planning attorney. If you have questions for Nick, CincinnatiEstatePlan.com, start there. You can schedule a time to meet with him if you want to talk about anything we discuss here, or just want to start building out your estate plan and making sure everything is in order for your wishes. The next, I guess, kind of area here to review, Nick, are your assets beneficiaries. So what are you specifically looking at here?
Well, this is, and again, Ben, we've talked about this on the show multiple times in the context of getting your estate plan put together, new accounts, new assets, and kind of checkups as it is. But this is another good time to review your accounts, review your assets for a couple reasons. One, anything that is held jointly, you will eventually have to do paperwork to remove your spouse, so it's just in your name. Bank accounts, real estate, vehicle titles, investments, you name it. And then items that are only in your spouse's name. So if you had like a retirement account that was in your husband or wife's name and then it got rolled over to you, that is also something that, one, you need to get it rolled over to you. And then eventually everything should be either in your name or without your spouse's name, or in the name of the trust, but you're the only person in charge of the trust anymore. But you also need to make sure that that is still lined up with your estate plan. I've had plenty of times in the past where someone sets up the beneficiaries properly, to the trust or in the trust. And then when it gets moved or converted or whatever the institution has to do, in the back of the house to remove the deceased spouse or roll it over, for whatever reason, all the beneficiaries or the titling gets erased. So they'll roll it over to the wife's name or the husband's name. They pass away, and the trust being the beneficiary or what have you suddenly is gone. So it is something where get things into your name, get everything processed and remove your spouse's name. and to make sure that it's still lined up, whether to the trust or the kids or whatever the proper beneficiary or transfer on death is. Make sure that that is still the case, because that's a step that people miss all the time.
Yeah, good to know. And again, you may not make any changes in these, but you want to be talking about everything on this list and having these discussions. And I guess, what's kind of the last thing here, Nick? I know things are going to change, right? I know that there's a lot of pressure, and it's not just with your estate plan. It's probably financially. It's a lot of different areas that, hey, I've got to make decisions now. I'm not in a position to. Are these going to be final? I'm surely stressing over that. But like everything else, like your life's going to evolve, things can change, and you can make adjustments down the road, right?
Well, of course. And so I tell people a couple things. Obviously, give yourself a little bit of leeway, give yourself some grace, if you will. I tell people, yes, we need to do this. Yes, we need to look at it. It doesn't need to be the same day as the funeral. Like, I have people who call me, and they say, my spouse passed away today. The funeral hasn't even happened yet. And I like to let them know, hey, let's chat in a month. Let's chat in a couple months here. It's okay to take a breath. A lot of what we can do can wait. Not forever, but you don't need to see me before planning the funeral. Okay, there are things that are urgent and there's things that can wait, at least for the short term. So I always like to let people know, take a deep breath. And when you are ready to sit down and have this discussion and have this review, we will be here for you. But it does not need to be this minute. And then I normally put things on here like, hey, I'll put a note here. I'll give you a call in 90 days. And we'll look at that point. And then also, obviously some of the what ifs that you were projecting or planning for when you first did your estate plan, when both of you were alive, especially if the plan was done a while ago, you have to look at all this and see if that's actually how that played out, see what changed. And again, whatever changes are made, if something, if they need to be adjusted again or reverted back to the way they were set up before, that's okay. That flexibility is a good thing. Again, it's emotional, and I think it's something where I tell people, I give them, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of grace to kind of do this when they're ready. And Ben, usually people fall into one of two categories. There will be people who say, I feel like I got ran over by a truck. I can't even think straight. I don't want to talk about this. And I don't want to do anything more than I absolutely have to today. And there are other people who say, Nick, unfortunately, this is on my worry list along with everything else. It is haunting me. And I understand I haven't even taken time to grieve yet, but the sooner I can cross this off my list and say, this is done and I don't have to worry about it anymore, the more peace of mind it will give you. Both approaches are okay. It's really, talking to the clients, finding out where they're at and when they're ready to have a review. But the one thing I will say is it is not a good idea to have no review. Yeah. Even if it's a month after someone passes away or if it's 3 months after someone passes away. It's just good to look at all of this. And also, I think it's very comforting, right, when you look through all of this to say, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry about your loss, but we took a look at all of this. Everything is working exactly the way it's supposed to, and we have everything set up in case something happens to you. And I think that can be comforting. And so it's nice to be able to do that and make sure everything's on course.
If you're ready to have a conversation, you can do so in two different ways. Log on CincinnatiEstatePlan.com. You'll see a big link there on the front to schedule a call with Nick. But if you want to call the office directly as well, you can do that at 513-463-6789. Well, tough position to be in. But again, take your time, think through this, and make sure you do take the time to review your wishes. Nick, thanks for the time as always.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a grim topic, certainly, but it's good to know, and it's something that needs to be done. And again, if anyone needs help, certainly give us a call. We'll be here when you need us.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by estate planning? The process can seem complex, but it doesn't have to be. The Rosenbauer Law Office is dedicated to helping you protect what matters most: your family, your assets, and your peace of mind. Nick and the team will guide you through every step of the process, making sure you feel confident and informed along the way. Take the first step toward peace of mind today. Schedule an introductory call by clicking the link in the description of today's show.
This show is for informational purposes only and does not provide any legal advice. Information on this show may not constitute the most up-to-date legal information. Please do not act or refrain from acting based solely on anything you hear on this show. This show does not form any attorney-client relationship with the Rosenbauer Law Office, LLC. Please seek the counsel of a qualified attorney before addressing your own estate planning needs.